I wish you all a happy new year, happy family, smooth relationship, high career, and smooth sailing in the journey of life. As in the title, I have a toothache today and I can't write anything, so I'll fill it up tomorrow. I have something to do today, suspend it for a day, and make up for it tomorrow. Zhao Ji felt pain all over his body. There was pain on the forehead, 2 arms, and 2 calves, which seemed to be injured. Moreover, he felt that he was still being pressed by something heavy, and it was very difficult to breathe in his chest. After feeling the pain for a while, Zhao Ji found that fortunately, the main part of the body did not feel pain. And he couldn't keep his eyes open, and the possible wound on his head made his head dizzy at the moment. By taking a slow and long deep breath, he accumulated some strength in his body. Zhao Ji did not move the arms and calves that were constantly in pain, but twisted and struggled with the trunk of his body from side to side, and borrowed the strength of his waist and thighs to move some heavy objects that were pressed on the trunk of his body. Whoa, whoa, whoa whoa! As Zhao Ji twisted, the heavy things on his body slipped to the sides of his body, which made his chest no longer pressed by the heavy things, and he could breathe more smoothly. Zhao Ji breathed slowly, and then gathered his strength again. This time, he still didn't move his arms and legs, but borrowed the strength of his trunk to straighten his body again. Get rid of the heavy weight. Crash, the sound of stones sliding down. Zhao Ji blinked his eyes slightly for a while, and finally opened them, as if his eyes hadn't worked for a while. What came into his eyes was a gloomy forest, full of dense branches and white and green leaves. Zhao Ji raised his head and saw the sky through the gaps between the dense trees. The weather in the sky was gloomy, as if thick rain clouds had accumulated. Zhao Ji looked around in a daze. It turned out that he himself was half buried by some broken stones and rotten soil of the forest. The so-called half-buried means that no pit was dug, but the lying person was covered with materials. But why was he buried? What happened? And not far from the place where he was buried, about a few meters away was a rough dirt road. He himself was buried by the side of the road, which extended in advance, and on the other side of the dirt road was a sparser forest. My head hurts, my arms and legs hurt too, are you hurt? Zhao Ji just wanted to reach out his hand to touch the sore spot on his forehead, but he was stunned when he looked at the right hand in front of his eyes. It's not my hand at all. What happened? It's not my hand at all. What's up? The hand in front of Zhao Ji was quite different from his own. It's a bit too small, and it looks like the palm and back of the hand are very rough. I don't know if it's because of being buried, the whole hand is black and yellow, but no matter what, it's not my hand. But he, Zhao Ji, did stretch out his right hand and shook hands. It hurt so much. The tiger's mouth on the right hand hurts, as if the muscles are torn, but fortunately, it is not serious and does not affect the grip, etc. Zhao Ji noticed the sleeve on his right arm, which was not the long sleeve of the jacket he was wearing before waking up, nor the striped long-sleeved shirt inside the jacket. Zhao Ji quickly stretched out his left hand to look, and it was the same. The tattered clothes were a kind of tattered clothes made of rough fibers, and there were blood stains on the tattered sleeves. I gently touched the blood-stained and tattered place on the sleeve with my hand, and there was a pain, it hurts so much. It seems that the arm is injured here. And he has wounds on both arms, but fortunately, there is no more bleeding now, and the wounds on his arms do not affect the movement of his limbs. Zhao Ji stretched out his hand to touch the painful spot on his head again. It still hurt a lot, but it didn't bleed anymore. Fortunately. Zhao Ji suddenly noticed that there were a few broken hairs on his hand where he touched the wound on his head, but the color of the broken hair was wrong. He is a Chinese, and he had never dyed his hair since he was a child, but now the broken hair on his hand is golden brown. Zhao Ji was a little panicked, and gently pulled out a few hairs from other parts of his head. Indeed, they were all golden brown. What happened? Isn't that right, bro? Could it be that the current situation is the soul grabbing in the novel story, but why is it a foreigner? Can rebirth work? I want to be reborn. And isn't he near his house? Do you want to seize the house based on the principle of proximity, and find a vegetative person in the hospital nearby to seize the house? Why is he a foreigner? And he, Zhao Ji, was walking well on the road in his own community by himself. Why did he turn into this when he closed his eyes and opened them again? The repeated thinking made him a little tired, and the pain in his head made Zhao Ji slightly dizzy. Zhao Ji lay down again and rested for a while in his grave. It was very quiet, very quiet. Except for the regular chirping of various birds and insects coming from the distant woods, there was no other movement around him. Zhao Ji, who lay down and rested for a while, gradually came to his senses. It should not be about seizing the body, but similar to resurrecting the soul with a dead body. No matter how you look at your body covered in injuries, it looks like it was simply buried on the side of the road after death. In addition, the injuries to the limbs and head let him confirm that it seems that the previous owner of this body did die accidentally. Here it is. Judging from the clothes on his body, the original owner of his body was a poor man. The material of the clothes is very strange, not like common cotton or chemical fiber, more like the kind of hemp clothes worn by the ancient people in the history books. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com must be worn by the ancient people only when you can't afford cotton cloth. Zhao Ji didn't care so much anymore. This place didn't look like a place where someone would pass by recently. He had to get out of here first and seek help from others. Zhao Ji struggled to remove the earth and rocks on his legs little by little. It wasn't that there were too many rocks or heavy rocks, it was because both of his arms were injured, which didn't affect the movement of the arms, but he couldn't use any strength at all. After a while, Zhao Ji moved his legs out. Zhao Ji found that his legs were also injured. His thigh was fine, but his calf was torn apart by something. Zhao Ji touched the injured area. It was very painful, but there was no bleeding like his arm. So far so good. It seems to be able to stand up and walk around. Zhao Ji tried to stand up with his hands on his side, but it was very difficult. He had to complete such a simple movement little by little now. The main reason is that it seems that he hasn't eaten for a long time, his body doesn't have any strength, and his legs can't make any effort. After the whole movement, his heart is beating hard. When Zhao Ji stood up, his mouth felt dry and his head was dizzy. He hurriedly moved 2 steps and leaned against the trunk of a nearby tree. Zhao Ji opened his mouth and breathed heavily, forcibly straightening out the shortness of breath into a smooth one. The mouth felt more and more dry, and Zhao Ji guessed that this body hadn't drank water for a while. The lack of water in the body is a very dangerous sign, and the injuries to this body seem to be fine for the time being. The hunger of the human body can also be tolerated. This body is still quite strong, and the muscles in the body can resist hunger at the last moment. And the wound on the forehead was no longer so painful under Zhao Ji's slow breathing. The next key is lack of water and thirst. No water is a big problem, and water must be found quickly. Zhao Ji panted for a while, feeling that his body was still very weak, and walking with such sloppy steps would definitely not work. He had to find something to support his body and keep his weak body walking in balance. He tugged at the trunk of the tree against which his back was leaning. It was as thick as the mouth of a bowl. Looking around, there is a small tree on the opposite side of the dirt road in front of him, which should be fine. The small tree is slightly thinner than his wrist, and the trunk is very straight, which is just suitable for him to use as a walking stick for his walking support. Breathing slowly, he accumulated some strength and stamina, and Zhao Ji stood up and walked slowly to the dirt road. Zhao Ji looked down and noticed that there were wheel prints and animal hoof prints on the dirt road, but the wheel prints were not the rubber wheel prints in his impression, because there was no tire pattern, and there was also a problem with the width of the wheel prints, which were very narrow, similar to the width of a bicycle tire. Zhao Ji thought it might be the car he used to pull goods in some remote village. There are also some shallow footprints on the road, but there are also no patterns on the soles, which is a bit strange. Zhao Ji didn't think of his own feet until he saw the footprints. Look down. There was nothing on his feet, except for one bare foot. His shoes were missing, probably taken away by the person who buried the body. Also, it seems that people who died in the wild don't need a shoe. Zhao Ji observed carefully and found that the feet of this body were very thick and strong, and there was a thick layer of calluses on the soles of the feet. It seemed that he seldom walked with shoes on before. Now Zhao Ji does not feel any discomfort when walking barefoot on the dirt road, if the pain from the wounds on the limbs is excluded. Zhao Ji slowly moved himself to the other side of the dirt road step by step. He grabbed the top of the selected tree with both hands, took a deep breath, lowered his body's center of gravity, and clenched the trunk of the small tree with both hands, fall back. With a creak, the lower part of the small tree was torn open by Zhao Ji borrowing his weight, and Zhao Ji also fell to the ground. Fortunately, there were dead branches and fallen leaves on the ground to cushion him. How it hurts! Zhao Ji gasped for a while, then stood up and grabbed the little tree, and pulled it back slowly, tearing off the bark that was connected to the bottom of the little tree. Zhao Ji felt a little tired, white spots flashed in front of his eyes. He understood that it was because his body was weak and tired, his eyes were full of stars, so he quickly sat down and took a rest. While breathing slowly, Zhao Ji pulled down the twigs and leaves of this small tree. His mouth was still very thirsty, and Zhao Ji, who was short of water, tried to put a clean leaf that had been pulled down into his mouth to taste. He first put a little bit in his mouth, chewed it, a fresh fragrance bloomed in his mouth, his spirit was shaken, and there was no bitter feeling in his mouth. He probably felt all right, and he didn't care about it anymore. Now that he was tired, thirsty, and hungry, and the wound on his body was still aching, he quickly put one leaf after another into his mouth, chewed and swallowed it carefully. Of course, Zhao Ji still picked it up and ate the green fresh leaves from the tree, but he didn't eat the few yellowed and withered ones. After taking a good rest for a while, the sky darkened overhead, and a gust of breeze blew up. These breezes blew the upper leaves of the forest, and at the same time, some of them passed through the sparse forest and blew on Zhao Ji's body. Through the sparse forest, Zhao Ji saw the direction of one end of the dirt road. The thick cloud in the sky spread away along the direction of the wind, and a moon-like celestial body hung in the sky among the scattered cloud. What is this? Zhao Ji was stunned. The celestial body was as big as the moon, emitting a faint green light. Just as Zhao Ji stared at the object for a short time, the floating cloud covered it again. Zhao Ji, who was lying on the ground, looked a little numb. He grasped and shook his hands, and thought about it for a while. He just ate the leaves to pad his stomach. He decided to find an open place first, and observe what was hanging in the sky just now. He was curious and confused at the same time, feeling out of place from the moment he woke up. No matter what was in the sky just now, go and see first, maybe it can explain the doubts in his mind now. Holding up the branches, he stood up and walked slowly to the side of the dirt road. Zhao Ji looked along the two ends of the dirt road. On the dirt road on his left, the woods are getting denser, but the clearest footprints and toes on the road are indeed heading in this direction. Maybe you can find help from people walking this way. On the dirt road on his right, the woods were gradually thinning out, but it was in the same direction as the footprints on the road, and there might or might not be any help on this side. What to do? Which direction should he choose? Zhao Ji thought about it. Zhao Ji walked slowly towards the sparse forest on the right, holding a small tree trunk in both hands for body support. When he was just thinking about it, he wanted to understand one thing. He seemed to be dead at the end when he was still Zhao Ji. He was walking in the neighborhood of his home, and vaguely heard exclamations from above his head and the sound of things falling. Reading www.uuganshu. After calm, he lost consciousness all of a sudden. Maybe he was killed because of a falling object. Zhao Ji's complexion was originally bad because of the pain and weakness all over his body, but thinking of this, his complexion became even worse. But no matter how bad his face was, he could only walk slowly along this dirt road step by step. After walking slowly for a few hundred meters like this, the sparse woods on both sides of the dirt road turned into tall bushes with various small flowers blooming on the bushes, and some large rocks were scattered under the bushes. Seeing that his vision had broadened, Zhao Ji looked forward along the dirt road. The terrain in front has ups and downs, and one after another gentle hills extend out to the horizon, and most of the hills are wilderness and sparse woods. Looking up from a distance, the cloudy clouds in the sky have been blown away by the wind, revealing a large area of sky. It is obviously not night, and the sun is still hanging on the other side of the sky, but there is nothing in the sky. You can see several celestial bodies similar to the moon hanging in the sky. Those celestial bodies are not big or small, and they are far away from each other. They emit dim light of various colors, blue, green, purple and red. What kind of patterns are there, but he can't see clearly, and some white spots are still floating in front of his eyes from time to time. The green celestial body I saw just now is also there, and it seems to be in the same position as the one I saw in the woods just now, and it seems to be in the same position as before. Zhao Ji was a little strange, but he didn't dare to think too much. He just stared blankly at the strange celestial bodies in the sky, sat down on a gentle stone by the roadside, leaned on a small tree branch with both hands and thought, this kind of development. Could it be that I have come to the strange world in the fantasy novels? The world. The sky became darker than before, and the wind became stronger than before, and the flowers in the bushes on the ground were swayed by the wind. Sitting on the stone, Zhao Ji felt a little cold. He suddenly woke up and had to move his body, otherwise he might faint here suddenly due to weakness. He himself is very weak now, and the clothes on his body are also very thin and pitiful. Although it seems that the former owner of this body has done a lot of farm work, and his body is relatively strong, the weakness caused by so much blood is still a big problem. Question. Moreover, Zhao Ji judged from the hunger coming from his body that the former owner of this body should not have eaten before he died. After so long, he only ate some leaves to satisfy his hunger and thirst. Now his body is obviously very hungry. Hunger can make people lose their minds. Now Zhao Ji can only hold on to see if there are any people nearby, and ask for help. The wilderness around and the woods in the distance seem to be a natural environment. Only the dirt road next to it is man-made. Of course, we have to start thinking about the road. Judging from the fact that Zhao Ji himself was buried on the side of the road, and there are fresh footprints and wheel marks on the road, it can be seen that this small dirt road was still passed by people. Are you just waiting for someone to come to your rescue? But what if the person who passed by recently was the only person who walked this way within a few days, then he would not be able to finish the game, and after he died, he would fall into a different world, and he would have to die again every day, or would he die of starvation or thirst? He couldn't afford to lose the face of the time-traveling seniors. For now, we still have to actively look for opportunities. Zhao Ji thought about this, lifted his spirits, and walked slowly along the unfinished end of the dirt road, holding the thin tree trunk in his hand. Zhao Ji walked slowly while observing his surroundings. First of all, he was wary of wild beasts. After all, his body seemed to be like this after being attacked by wild beasts. Second, through observation, accumulate information in other worlds, and see if you can obtain useful information based on your own knowledge and experience to ensure your own survival. The road under your feet is a dirt road. Once it rains, this kind of road will turn into a muddy road. But when there is no rain, it is okay, especially Zhao Ji has no shoes now, and he is walking barefoot, and the feeling of stepping on the soil with bare feet is quite good. After all, Zhao Ji has never walked barefoot on dirt roads before. Occasionally, there are stones on the side of the road, and Zhao Ji will sit on the stones to rest his feet. Slowly and weakly, Zhao Ji found that as long as there are some stones on the roadside, the road will be paved with these stones by the way. Pave the dirt road with a layer of small gravel. These small gravels may be convenient for travelers wearing shoes or carriages, but for Zhao Ji who has no shoes, it brings some sour pain to him. He thought as he walked, and he discovered something extra about the road through observation and knowledge. This road with mixed soil and rocks must not be developed and built by a large organization or country, but led by a smaller organization or group. The reason is very simple. If it is a large organization, it will definitely not build such an untechnical dirt road in such a remote place. As long as roads are to be built, large organizations will definitely build more convenient and longer-lasting stone roads. Even if there are no stone slabs, the entire road can be paved with a layer of gravel, or the roadbed will be dug deep and relaid. Not easily damaged by plant growth and reproduction. But there are none of the above on this road, which can only mean that it was built spontaneously by a small organization or group, similar to a village or tribe. Zhao Ji's knowledge told him that any human settlement must be established where there is water, especially where the technology is not very developed. Water is the source of life, and human beings and all life cannot live without water sources, so the human settlements that the road leads to should be places with water nearby, and he can pay attention to these places to find vitality when he walks. Roads always lead from one end to another, from one place to another, from one human settlement to another. As long as he walked along the road, he would always meet other humans to pray for help. Zhao Ji said this to himself. The surrounding terrain is all small hilly landforms. Although the hills are not high, they also block Zhao Ji's vision, making him unable to see far. Moreover, the road under his feet did not go straight over the hills, but instead circled around the bottom of the hills and circumvented the hills in an arc. After passing another hill, Zhao Ji felt that he had to stop and take a good rest. When he was walking on the road just now, he picked some unknown bright-colored berries from the bushes on the side of the road to eat. He didn't intend to eat them at first, but his mouth was so thirsty that he couldn't hold back. It is round and juicy again. Unable to bear his thirst, Zhao Ji went to the bushes by the side of the road and ate all those colorful and bright berries. I thought I would die, at least I would have a stomachache, but nothing happened. It seems that either the berries I ate just now are not poisonous, or this body usually eats them and there is no adverse reaction in the body. Zhao Jigang planned to stop to rest, but before taking 2 steps, the dirt road in front of him forked, which was a fork in the road. Damn it! Zhao Ji murmured in a low voice and walked over. The long-awaited human village has not been seen, but at this time there is a choice between life and death. If you choose the wrong way, it may be fatal. The road is divided into 2 here, leading to 2 other different places. At the fork of the road, there is a big stone, which is as high as a person, with some words and pictures carved on it. Zhao Ji was very happy at first, but when he walked over and looked left and right, he couldn't understand what was written on the stone, which made him quite frustrated. Fortunately, the pictures carved on the stone were clear and simple, which made him understand the explanation roughly means. Stone carvings show small figures on horseback walking about, defeating enemies and wild beasts. Zhao Ji reckoned that those villains on horseback should be the managers here, walking around should be meant to patrol, indicating that this is the territory they rule. The engraved pictures show that the enemies are not riding horses, which firstly shows that the enemies are weak, and secondly, the enemies are not like them. As for the beast, it's interesting. One of the beasts in the engraving is very large, as big as the little man on the horse. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. How tall is a person riding a horse? Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. According to experience, Zhao Ji estimates that it is about 2.2 meters, and a beast of this size must not weigh hundreds of kilograms or a ton. Another beast in the picture has several heads, and it is not too small compared to the equestrian figurine it is fighting with. The last beast has a simple pattern of flames around its mouth, and some of the equestrians have fallen from their horses. Aha! Zhao Ji got excited, that flame must be magic, it must be magic, how can there be no magic in the fantasy world, this is a repertoire. The beast that can make magic may be a monster. Haha, Zhao Ji happily waved the thin tree trunk in his hand. A while later, when Zhao Ji was observing the letters on the stone. Jingle bell, jingle bell, jingle bell. A bell rang slowly from the other side of the hill. Zhao Ji was taken aback for a moment, and then he was very excited. After all, he is so miserable now, no matter what the situation is, he is better than now. After putting down the thin tree trunk in his hand, he walked to the middle of the fork in the road, waved his hands and yelled loudly in the direction of the sound. The visitors were 4 donkey carts pulling goods, and each donkey cart was equipped with 2 donkeys, pulling a smaller but longer 4-wheeled wooden cart. There are 2 people sitting in the driver's seat of the wooden cart. The small but long wooden cart is full of bags and baskets made of fur and cloth and vines, and the bags and baskets are full. And there was a person sitting on the cargo of the first car at the end. That person was different from the other drivers because of the clothes he was wearing. It wasn't the khaki unlined clothes that looked a little cheap like others, but the dark black long-sleeved clothes that looked more formal. It looks like a small caravan. Zhao Ji waved his hand and looked at the other party and roughly judged. Among the caravans that detoured from the road in the hills. Yo, Jamla, there is a person in front calling for help. It seems that something is wrong. Did you see it? The caravan driver of the donkey cart leading the small caravan turned his head to the caravan leader who was sitting on the goods behind. Asked loudly. I've seen it a long time ago, don't worry, everyone cheer up, and pay attention to whether there are ambushes around. Jamura first replied to his companion, and then said to everyone in the caravan. I didn't hear Night Jenny say that there are bandits from the south nearby. Jamura then whispered to herself. Hearing the words of the caravan leader Jamura, the 4 farmers sitting on the co-driver of the 4 donkey carts clenched their farm tools, cheered up, and looked around to be vigilant, especially the backs of the hills. They are even more careful, worried about whether there is a hidden gang of robbers. Of course, for the farmers living in the frontier areas of the border kingdom, if they were just a small group of bandits, they would have the courage to fight against them. Those bandits were no more difficult to deal with than the wild wolves wandering around the village. As they got closer, Zhao Ji could clearly see the composition of this small caravan, a small caravan with 4 cars and 9 people. The cart is a wooden cart, pulled by a donkey, and inside the cart is a basket made of rattan plants, with the same cover on the basket. I don't know what is inside. Each cart was pulled by 2 donkeys, and the driver had a driver, who wore a pair of dark brown uniform cloaks over light-colored singlets, and each cart had a driver sitting with them. There was a strong man wearing farm tools and simple clothes. On the last car's warehouse, there was a middle-aged man wearing a dark black formal attire and also wearing a cloak. Similarly, Zhao Ji was observing the caravan, and the people in the caravan were also observing Zhao Ji, the person who called for help. This is a strong young man with golden brown hair. He seems to have encountered something dangerous. There is blood-stained hair above his forehead. It seems that the head has been injured. The clothes are torn and made of ordinary materials, similar to the farmer. They're all dressed about the same. He is physically strong, but his limbs have been injured, and it looks like he is still seriously injured. He is staggering and unable to stand upright. But at this time, it seems that they are very happy to see their caravan. Since seeing them, they have waved their arms to greet them and yelled a few times as much as possible. Under the driver's control, the convoy slowed down and stopped in front of Zhao Ji, but the 2 people sitting together in each car whispered to each other, and no one got out of the car to greet Zhao Ji. Zhao Ji was still wondering why he didn't even ask anyone, but he saw the person sitting on the cargo in the last car jump out of the car, and then strode to the front of the caravan. It seems that the caravan it is this man who speaks and manages. Jamura walked to the front of the convoy. He felt that his skills were fairly agile, and he jumped off the car just now. These years of organizing a team for business not only did not degrade his skills, but also made him stronger than when he was young. His peers and friends of his age are all pot-bellied and don't look very healthy, and he can even outmaneuver 2 of his younger selves at once, whether it's drinking or fighting or making money. He walked around the convoy and took a closer look at the young man. The condition of the young man is very bad. His limbs are all injured, and the wound does not appear to be bandaged. He can only let the wound stop bleeding and heal naturally. It can be clearly seen that the wound was bitten by wild animals like wolves and dogs, not by weapons. Something like that hurts. The wound on the head was hidden by the golden brown hair, but the young man's face was pale, and some green juice was randomly stained on his lips, as if he had swallowed wild plants in an attempt to heal the wound. Isn't this nonsense? How can people who don't understand herbs eat plants in the wild? Although the young man looked very bad, he still showed a clear smile when facing him. Unlike the bad guys, the eyes of the bandits who rob merchants and travelers are not like this. Jamura breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that this person is not a spy of bandits, and he is not likely to be a bad person. After all, the wounds cannot be faked. The wounds are all on the limbs, and they were bitten by animals. If they were bandits, they would only use something like a dagger to make fake wounds. Moreover, the young man hadn't worn shoes on his feet yet, and the dust had already turned his feet yellowish yellow. Where are you from? What happened on the road? After a moment of relief in his heart, Jamura asked the young man. Hey! Zhao Ji heard the caravan manager on the opposite side come over to observe him, and then the words he asked were obscured. Because he found that he couldn't understand what the other person said. This matter is actually a bit predictable. After all, when Zhao Ji observed the pattern on the big rock before, there were words on it, but Zhao Ji couldn't understand it at all. Of course, it may also be that the original owner of this body did not know words, and Zhao Ji did not get any help from his brain. But now that he can't even understand what the person in front of him is saying, then he really can't understand the language here. And there is no memory of the original owner of the body. Isn't it written in the novel that there will be memory fusion? Why didn't I? Good luck to all the masters. Can you rearrange this time travel? I will definitely not forget you when the small ones develop later. Although he can't understand, Zhao Ji still has to communicate with others to let them know that he needs help now and is not a bad person. Hello, I'm injured, can you help me? Zhao Ji still wanted to try, so he asked the steward opposite him for help. Jamura was also stunned. After he finished talking to the young man in front of him just now, he noticed that the young man on the opposite side looked confused, and that confusion didn't seem to be able to be faked. As a result, when the young man on the opposite side spoke, it was a language he had never heard before. He probably realized that he was an outsider, so he couldn't understand what he said. And maybe he is not even from his own country. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com is a traveler or immigrant from a distant country. After all, the frontier country he lives in is not big. The whole country speaks one language. The language of the inhabitants of the empire. Because the entire kingdom is mostly a young country composed of poor people who migrated from the empire. The two people on the donkey cart behind Jamura also heard what Zhao Ji said, and whispered in surprise. After thinking about it for a while, since the young man seemed to be in no danger, Jamura decided to provide assistance to the distressed people in front of him. This kind of assistance cost very little, but the subsequent benefits are always considerable. Stop whispering. Bring me some drinking water, bring me some of the water, ointment, and clean zabu in the jar. Jamura turned her head and ordered to the subordinates behind her. Yes, sir, replied the cloaked driver of the donkey cart. Then the driver stood up and turned around to open the storage box under the seat, and took out a small jar of ointment and zabu from it. He asked the driver in the second car for water and drinking water, and whispered to him. The farmer who was sitting with him said, "I'm going down, you should wake up and pay attention to your surroundings." The farmer clenched the farm tools in his hand and nodded. While his subordinates were preparing things, Jamura first had some simple communication. He knew how to communicate with a foreigner who couldn't speak imperial language. He patted his chest and said, "Jamura, Kulanjan Mula Wall. Then he pointed at the other party, motioning Zhao Ji to introduce his own name. Zhao Ji understood. He also patted his chest and said, Zhao Ji, Zhao Ji. Zhou Qiu. Jamura repeated. Ah! Zhao Ji was stunned again. Why do you name people indiscriminately? What the hell, why do you name people indiscriminately? Zhao Ji wanted to refute a few words, but he thought that the other party could not understand what he said, and it was difficult to refute what he said, and he still needed help from the other party, so he nodded and pinched his nose to admit it. This issue. This is considered to be doing as the Romans do. Selling him face. After all, when I was young, I was called Chicken by my classmates. Let's use it as a nickname. Zhao Ji thought to himself. The two drivers got out of the car and handed the things to Jamura: ointment, zabu, clear water and a skin of drinking water. Enclose the carts, form a circle, don't relax just because of the daytime, move, move. Jamura yelled loudly, and the two drivers quickly climbed onto the donkey cart, and the four drivers operating the donkey cart formed a rectangle with Jamla and Zhao Ji as the center. Zhao Ji was a little puzzled. He didn't know why it was so unnecessary to surround the car like this. If it was done like this, wouldn't it increase the trouble when we set off in a while? At this time, Jamura patted Zhao Ji's shoulder lightly and pointed to the wheel, motioning him to sit on the wheel of a donkey cart in a circle, raised the ointment in his hand, smiled, and motioned him to take the medicine started. Understanding what the other party meant, Zhao Ji followed Jamura's instructions and sat on the spokes of the donkey cart. Then Jamura signaled Zhao Ji to stretch out his arms. Knowing that the other party wanted to treat his wound, Zhao Ji quickly stretched out his arms. His wound was always painful. If not for the injuries on both his legs and calves, it is impossible to walk a short distance in one afternoon. After all, it takes so much effort to walk. Of course, this was also a matter of good luck, and I happened to meet this caravan at a fork in the road. Otherwise, he would have to walk all the way to the gathering place of human beings. Not to mention whether he could make it through, but if he stopped, then he would have to eat grass all the way in the wild to fill his stomach. Jamura opened a small wooden barrel, which was 30 to 40 centimeters high and short. He first soaked a fairly clean jute cloth in water, took it out after the cloth was soaked, and then washed and wiped the wound on Zhao Ji's arm with a damp cloth, and wiped away the soil, blood and some grass seeds stained on the wound. Kind of thing erased. After opening the small jar of the ointment, a fresh scent of green grass wafted out. Zhao Ji sniffed, and the pleasant smell made him want to inhale the grassy scent a few more times. Jamura then dipped one end of the clean cable tie with ointment. The ointment was a dark green sticky ointment, and covered Zhao Ji's wound with the ointment-coated cable tie, and wrapped the remaining cable tie around Zhao Ji's wound. Ji's arm circled twice, then tied it tightly. Repeat again. Zhao Ji's other arm was prepared in the same way. The pain in the wound miraculously disappeared gradually. Zhao Ji was surprised. His wound was obviously not healed, but the ointment may contain something that paralyzes the pain of the wound tissue, and this paralysis only covers the pain of the wound, and does not the movement of the hands was not affected. Zhao Ji shook his hands, feeling something. Jamura opened the water sack, which was obviously made from the stomach pouch of some kind of animal. Jamla handed the water bag to Zhao Ji. Water, drink. And made a demonstration of drinking water, indicating that the other party should drink water. Zhao Ji took the water bag, and his hand sank. The water bag was quite heavy. Gudong, gudong. Zhao Ji drank a small amount to moisten his throat, and then drank heavily. Ah, cool. After drinking enough water, Zhao Ji felt really happy, and his whole body didn't seem to hurt much. It turned out that Jamura healed Zhao Ji's wounds on both calves while Zhao Ji was drinking water. If they didn't understand, they also explained how powerful it was, saved so-and-so's life, and which big shots were injured and Jamura treated them. Haha, you're right. Old man Oldford, the city's second-ranking tax officer, fell off his horse and broke his leg. I fixed it. Jamura was very proud, and proudly said to the farmers. The farmers also asked that their family members were injured in the future, hoping that Mr. Jamura would show kindness and help them when he came to the village. Jamura patted his chest and promised, saying that if he was injured and came to their foxtail caravan in the future, he would be right. Zhao Ji looked dazed when he saw them cheering each other up, but seeing that Jamura who treated him was the center of the compliments, he also laughed. Seeing that Zhao Ji also smiled, Jamura patted Zhao Ji on the shoulder and pulled him, signaling him to stand up, then stuck a little ointment on his fingertips, parted his hair, and rubbed it on Zhao Ji's head wound. The medicine was very effective, and Zhao Ji's head pain was relieved as soon as the ointment was applied. Zhao Ji took a deep breath, patted the dust on his buttocks, jumped a little, and felt much better. Although he was still very hungry, at least he was neither thirsty nor hurt. Jamura took Zhao Ji to the second donkey cart. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com signaled Zhao Ji to climb into the carriage and sit on the pile of goods. Zhao Ji tried it twice, stepped on the edge of the donkey cart and carefully climbed up to see what Jamura was still talking to the driver beside the cart. The driver fished out a small bundle of rope from the space under the seat and handed it to Jamura. "Young man, I'm sorry, although you don't look like a bandit, but for the safety of the caravan, I have to tie your hands. I will let you go when I get to the town." Jamura said loudly, talking to the guys, and farmers looking around raised the ropes in their hands, then tied Zhao Ji's hands and tied them in a knot. Zhao Ji was a little stunned, not knowing what was going on, and just wanted to struggle. But after seeing that other people around him were greatly relieved by Jamura's actions, he understood that everyone in the caravan had always regarded him as a bad guy. Yes, in this kind of wilderness, it is indeed possible for such a thing to happen, and this is what it should be. Zhao Ji had no choice but to follow everyone's wishes. After all, he had just healed his wound. Everyone was secretly wary of him, and they were relieved when they saw Zhao Ji's hands were bound, talking and laughing. He had to join the caravan safely and kindly. Thinking of this, Zhao Ji obediently asked Jamura to tie his hands firmly. "Anyway, as long as you don't die of thirst and starvation in the wilderness, or are bitten to death by wild animals, and your hands are tied, it's nothing." And after finding the caravan, Zhao Ji officially came into contact with the human civilization in this different world. According to Zhao Ji's observation, this caravan does not look like the kind of caravan that can travel long distances in such a backward society. It should arrive at the human settlement in a few days. Anyway, the status quo is good now. The caravan convoy started moving again, and the donkey cart drivers of the Chamber of Commerce lightly flicked the whips in their hands, letting the long whip lightly yank the donkey's buttocks, pulling the cart. Knowing that the master was urging them to go, the donkey raised its hooves reluctantly. "Got it, got it, got it, got it." After driving, the heated breeze made people feel comfortable. Zhao Ji relaxed and felt the warm wind blowing on his body. The convoy started in the same order as when they came, but instead of going the same way that Zhao Ji came, they chose to turn in another direction. In Zhao Ji's opinion, when he first crossed over, fortunately he chose the right direction. If he had taken the road in another direction, he would not have been as lucky as he is now to meet this caravan. The choice is wrong, and I don't know what will happen afterwards. It is getting late now, and it is very difficult to survive a night in the wild without encountering a caravan, and if it rains at night and the temperature drops sharply, he may freeze to death directly in the wild environment at night. Zhao Ji, who was half lying on the pile of goods, felt numb in the wound, and the pain that had been killing him before was gone. This made him a little curious. This miraculous ointment can produce a pain-inhibiting numbness on the wound just by applying it externally to the wound. It uses the numbness to suppress the pain of the wound. I don't know what kind of miraculous herb it is made of. Zhao Ji put his nose close to the wrapped wound and smelled it, and he could smell a strong smell of grass juice. After the small caravan drove quietly on the road for a while, everyone gradually became quiet. There were no hidden robbers. It seemed that the young man they rescued was indeed not a bad person. For a while, the only sound on the winding road was the crackling of the whip urging the donkey to move forward, and the unwilling but accustomed grunting of the donkey. The convoy was driving on the wild road, surrounded by small hilly wastelands. The road was built around the hills, and there was no road that could extend straight for 100 meters after turning around. The wasteland beside the road is full of various flowering shrubs and dwarf trees struggling to grow leaves, and bunches of bright flowers of various colors and sizes are blooming on the weeds on the ground beside the road. Amidst bursts of whipping and donkey braying, even the sound of the wind gradually faded away. Zhao Ji fell asleep because of physical fatigue and pain. He was really tired. Walking around while enduring the injury took a toll on his spirit. Jamura sat high on the cargo of the last truck, and saw that the caravan lost all energy for a while, and everyone was listless. The time is right to cheer up. Guys! Get your spirits up, Mr. Wolf. I've always heard that the men in the village of Umi Lake in the north of our county are the most singing yellow-browed birds in the mountains and forests. But I have never heard your singing. How can there be a yellow-feathered browed bird that sings all the time? Haha, can I think that this rumor is just an exaggerated rumor by villagers in other villages? Did the villagers in other villages mistake the chirping of birds for the singing of men in Wumihu village after drinking? Or did the men in Wumi Lake village eat the stinging weed at home before we went all the way, so they couldn't speak, couldn't sing, and could control their own wives but couldn't control their tongues? Jamura jokingly said to a strong farmer in the third car ahead. Humph, you bastard! We men in Wumi Lake village are the empty echoes in the mountains, the yellow-feathered browbirds in the forests, we are the gentle wind in the fields, and the waves of the lake caressing the solace of the feet. Guys! Follow me, sing a song together and let the people in the city see how powerful we are. Mr. Wharf, a strong farmer on the donkey cart, turned his head and looked at Jamla on the cart behind him, knowing what the other party said just now. Meaning, but he was not convinced that the men in his village could not sing, so he started the beginning of his singing and sang loudly. Zhao Ji didn't know what happened, and turned his head to look at Wolf and Jamura in the two cars behind him. He thought they were arguing because of him, but Mr. Wolf in the third car sang directly. This made Zhao Ji puzzled, thinking that this might be a strange local custom. It's kind of special. Ha ha, the wheat seedlings stand up in the rain and dew. Ha ha, the cropped wheat fields are robust. Ha ho, remove weeds and insects with both hands. Ha ho, guard my home with my feet. Mr. Wolf started the beginning, and the farmers in Wumi Lake village on the donkey cart also smiled. They let go of their singing voices that had been patient for several days, and joined Mr. Wolf's singing in unison. Ho ho, the jackals took away the goats at home. Ha ho, the fox killed the neighbor's rooster. Ha ho, the voles are full of black beans in the warehouse. Ha ho, the crows are destroying the wheat fields in the field. Singing loudly, everyone in the caravan was very happy, and then the farmers sang loudly again. Ah, anger can't save my goat. Ah, sad or not, back to your cock. Ah, begging for the black beans that can't be full. Ah, how can we protect everyone's wheat fields? Although Zhao Ji couldn't understand what the villagers were singing, he could still hum along with the tune. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. The iron-clad stick knocked the jackal flat. The night's hounds have caught the fox. The new house cat is full of rats. The wooden straw man scared away the crows. After singing here, the atmosphere of the chorus changed again, from loud to low. Sell the goats to buy iron-clad sticks. A rooster is the only way to invite the servants of the night. save the black beans to get a newborn kitten. Ah, ah, the straw man is standing on the ground, his eyes are glowing red. When the singing was over, the drivers in the caravan laughed, patted their thighs with their free hands, and applauded loudly. Jamura exclaimed loudly, "Okay, okay, I have to admit that the men in Umi Lake Village sing pretty well." Mr. Wolf replied, "It's good, but you don't need to admit it. Every man who grows up in our village is a sought-after item among girls in the county village." Jamura teased, "It's very popular. In recent years, young people in your village have gone to other villages to make a living." Before Mr. Wolf could refute, Jamura said loudly to his caravan drivers, "Let's play a song too. Don't let people underestimate the Chamber of Commerce. Let's play a song of our caravan." The caravan drivers laughed and agreed, and Jamie pulled his head back, and the drivers sang along. Jamura's thick voice was deliberately lowered to imitate the voice of young people, because this song is a song that praises brave young people who join the Chamber of Commerce and travel around the world. "I started from the small road in my hometown, and my ideals were neither small nor big. I clenched my fists and got nothing. The future may be under my feet. Without a copper coin in the pocket, there will be no money for the next meal. Farewell to my parents and brothers, I hope good luck be with me." Jamura's voice resounded on the road and wasteland, and the drivers picked up just in time. "Every meal is hard-earned. If there is no work, there will be no copper coins. It's not as simple and easy as a coolie cutting wood and digging a canal. I can't save 1 gold coin a year, and it's hard to go home without gold coins. Iron coins, copper coins, silver coins, and gold coins. I want gold coins, silver coins, and copper coins." The next sentence, everyone sing together. "Until the caravan comes to me, join us, join us. When you walk, you have donkeys, you eat and you have bread, and you have clothes and cloaks. You don't need to work hard and tire your body, you can walk around with the caravan. Beasts and robbers are not afraid of weird things, and money flows into their pockets." Everyone stopped at the last verse, and Jamura was the only one singing. "When the money is in the pocket, I will go back to my hometown and open new fields for my brothers. Buy new clothes for my sisters and build a new house for my parents. Build a mill in the middle of the village, and fences, ponds, and valleys. Young man, set off with me and join the caravan with me." After Jamura finished singing, the people in the caravan were in a lively atmosphere. The farmers whispered to the caravan driver sitting next door if he was really as good as he sang in the song, and if he could earn the money to replace his home with a new roof. "If you want to open a new field, you must plant a piece of sunflowers for oil extraction, whether your child's illness can be cured if you have money, and so on." Jamura was very happy, and once again successfully promoted the caravan. Seeing that it was getting dark, he ordered the drivers to stop and camp in the wasteland by the roadside. It was said to be camping, but in fact it was surrounded by donkey carts around a boulder on the side of the road. The bodies of the 4 donkey carts formed a loose semicircle. The donkey also took off the harness and rope, and a driver took out the food and water prepared for the livestock, and fed them to the donkeys one by one. A driver took out a rattan fence from the cargo compartment of the car, surrounded it on the side of the car, and tied it to the frame with a rope to prevent small animals from secretly eating the goods in the middle of the night. A driver took out rolled up thick tarpaulins and covered them one by one to prevent sudden rain in the middle of the night. A driver took out a small bag from under the seat and sprinkled the black-grey powder inside on the ground of the camp. Zhao Ji guessed that it might be a powder for repelling insects. The farmers built a campfire in the center of the camp. They first found stones to form a small circle, then pulled out the dried weeds in the camp to form a ball, and then took a few split wood blocks from the car to cover the fire. Hay bales piled in a cone shape. Jamura took out a small pot and looked at the black ash on the bottom of the small pot. This pot is commonly used by caravans. Jamura put the iron stand that came with the pot on the campfire, and put the small pot in the center of the iron stand. Jamura knelt down to face the campfire, closed her eyes, and muttered something in a low voice. The others stopped what they were doing at this moment and looked at Jamura without making a sound. Zhao Ji had been half leaning against the wheel before. After all, no one untied him from the rope, and he couldn't participate in everyone's work, so he had to watch from the sidelines. But looking at this scene at this time, he felt strange and very curious, but considering that it might be the customs and rules of this world, that is, before lighting the campfire, it is necessary to pray or something. He had no choice but to watch Jamla silently like everyone else. Jamura didn't read for long, the words whispered quickly and softly. As soon as he finished reading, he extended his right hand and pointed forward, and the hay ball at the point of the finger ignited a flame. The flame quickly ignited the hay ball, and then ignited the wood blocks prepared by the caravan. "Hey, why did you catch fire?" Zhao Ji could see clearly that the fire appeared after Jamura finished reading the words. Supernatural ability? Hidden a lighter in the heart of the right hand? I was stunned. Zhao Ji looked up at the unidentified objects hanging in the sky, and then looked down at the cars, personnel clothes, and campfires in the camp. Nodding, well, it must be a supernatural ability. There's something interesting about this world. After the campfire was lit, the farmers took out the food they carried from their luggage, which were dried beans, tuber-like plant roots, a little rough wheat grains and dried fish. Tear the dried fish into small pieces, put the rest into a small pot, pour in the water you carry, and stir with a wooden spoon. The wood blocks of the campfire steadily released heat to cook the food in the pot. The farmers took out their wooden bowls from the luggage again. After a while, Mr. Wolf saw the smell of the food in the pot. After judging that it was cooked, he used a wooden spoon to fill a full bowl for each of the farmers. The food in the pot has just been filled. The farmers sat on the ground in a daze, chatting while eating. Seeing that the farmers had prepared their own dinner, Jamura motioned for a driver boy to cook as well, and by the way, he would also cook for the young man Keel they met today.